Ladies and gentlemen, this is it. After establishing a story over the course of almost 3 decades, the Metal Gear saga is probably seeing its last untold chapter, at least under the jurisdiction of Hideo Kojima. However, this is no ordinary swan song. The Phantom Pain is Kojima's Symphony No. 9, a monumental finale before the series is put to rest. While the game still may isolate certain partitions of the fanbase, the Phantom Pain's progressive take on open-world gameplay is so refined that it simultaneously makes its predecessors and influences almost obsolete as a result. A lot of news surrounding the troublesome state of Konami's gaming division has surfaced recently, to the point that it may be a bit hard to recall just how this game came to life. Technically, it all started during Metal Gear's 25th anniversary function, where 2 main things were announced: a Metal Gear Solid movie produced by Avi Arad, and Metal Gear Solid Ground Zeroes. Note that there's no capital V in that title. It wouldn't be until Spike's VGAs of that year that the actual title of the Phantom Pain would surface amongst the public, but it wasn't advertised as a Metal Gear title at all. In fact, it was falsely produced to appear to be its own standalone game from a supposed new development team named Moby Dick Studios. After a plethora of press analysis and public speculation over the trailer, it was in fact deemed that the Phantom Pain was Metal Gear Solid. Yet so was Ground Zeroes. Of course, Ground Zeroes would eventually serve as the sort of prologue to the main game that would be the Phantom Pain, but it was met with its own form of critical response regarding the packaging. $30 for physical copy and $20 digital. It was supposed to be $40 and $30 respectively, but following public outcries it was dropped a few days before release. Overall, Ground Zeroes laid out the blueprint for the general format for what the Phantom Pain is. Not only did it outline the impressive nature of the new Fox engine and the gameplay to come, but it also began the foundations for a solid story. A year and a half later, the Phantom Pain would be released. Welcome to Afghanistan and Africa in 1984, the open-world environments of the Phantom Pain. Contrary to the world design that's seen in games like Grand Theft Auto, these areas aren't necessarily meant for sandbox gameplay, but more so to act as a tool for stealth. Overall traversal is never meant to be made an issue, and you can usually drop in via helicopter near your objective. Each map consists of distinguishable regions if you were ever to lose track of your place. Within each of these maps is an implemented dynamic weather system that is altered between the respective maps. When a sandstorm may spontaneously occur within the rocky mountain terrain of Afghanistan, a full-on thunderstorm may happen over the fields of Africa. I still feel that the jungle and the James Bond-esque setting of Snake Eater was captured better and serves to be the overall superior setting. That said, Phantom Pain still manages to succeed in its attempts to adhere to mature themes during this period of the Soviet-Afghan War, particularly dealing with stuff like child soldiers. Following Ground Zero's explosive finish after Big Boss's extraction of Chico and Paz in 1975, MSF is now left completely destroyed by the hands of Cypher. Following the incident, Big Boss falls into a coma, not to awake for 9 years. After narrowly escaping an assassination attempt and an extremely well-produced hospital mass homicide sequence, punished Venom Snake must rebuild his army without a nation, Diamond Dogs. Compared to previous Metal Gear Solid games, the story takes a significant backseat, even in comparison to Peace Walker. Gone are the days of annoying forum posts complaining that it's more of a movie than an actual game, as the game's cutscenes have never been anywhere near as this infrequent. That said, this doesn't bother me as much as I thought it would prior to release. The Phantom Pain has a very unique structure, unlike anything I've ever seen or played except maybe Peace Walker. A lot of times for the cutscenes may seem low on the surface, but think back to what truly made up the majority of those info dumps in the previous titles: the codec sequences. Surely, like many others, I see the codec calls as part of what makes the franchise so iconic. However, even a huge Metal Gear fan like me has to admit that some of those sequences just went on way too long, particularly evident in Metal Gear Solid 2.
What a weirdo!
To streamline this, the Phantom Pain instead utilizes an assortment of cassette tapes to fill in these sideline narratives. What makes this implementation so great is that you can listen to these during any dead air during gameplay. It proved to provide a good source of storytelling without possibly being intrusive in any way. Now, the story itself may not appeal to everyone, even longtime fans. Much like nearly every other Metal Gear title, the plot successfully manages to completely swipe the rug from underneath you but the aftermath has been polarizing this time. Personally, I think the turns it takes are absolutely awesome, but it will honestly vary from person to person. All that said, the story does seem somewhat unfinished by the time of its conclusion. If you haven't heard by now, Konami had an entire final chapter cut from the game, presumably to ship it out sooner. Is this the full extent of it all? Probably not, and chances are we won't actually know the reasoning for it to years to come. But as it stands, this is still a worthy Metal Gear from a narrative perspective, even if it's not fully complete. Mechanically, the Phantom Pain plays nearly identical to Ground Zeroes. Its action stealth refined to a T, allowing for greater level of accessibility to multiple playstyles. Similar to previous Metal Gear Solid titles, you can crouch and crawl to sneak around the guards and cameras to reach your objectives. The biggest deviation surfaces in the form of alerts, as the complications resulting are less severe and more adaptable than they ever have been. For me, I've always been a stealth player, so I went into every encounter with only the tranq pistol and restarted every time I got spotted. For those of you who aren't as dedicated to a particular playstyle like that, the game still has you accounted for. Even if you manage to be unsuccessful with the game's awesome implemented reflex mode, a sort of second chance to take out a guard before an official alert, you're not immediately out of luck, like you may have been in other main series titles. Pure reaction becomes the name of the game, and no two-player solutions to a given outpost or alert phase will be the same. Nothing ever grows to be frustrating at all, but rather continually impressive in light of the game's outstanding level design and appropriate AI. Taken right from Peace Walker, the Phantom Pain takes on a mission-based structure, separating in two fields of main missions and side ops. After you finish each main mission, you earn yourself a rank all the way up to S, determined based off your speed, stealth, and objective completion. When I played through Peace Walker, I never felt compelled to go back and obtain the S rank in each respective level. In the Phantom Pain, however, it would flat out bother me if I left any mission un-S ranked, as I would constantly find myself replaying levels to see if I can beat my time from a previous run. Side ops are in a different spectrum. However, even though you don't get ranked at the end of a side ops completion, it's the prime way to gain a substantial amount of GMP, the game's currency, and to raise your buddy's bond level. There are 4 separate buddies in the Phantom Pain, all of which are there to aid you in your endeavors throughout several mechanics. I personally use Quiet for the most general side ops and outpost takeovers, but all of them have their own sufficient uses. D-Horse is mainly useful to reversal and specific diversions, while D-Walker is good for pure action missions. Quiet and D-Dog, on the other hand, are useful for that core in-the-moment stealth, which usually occurs in the form of outpost and base takeovers. Carried over from Ground Zeroes, you can mark any given guard or key item to personally keep track of as many enemies as possible, and these buddies can help with those scenarios as well. This process is akin to the recent outpost capturing in recent Far Cry iterations, one of the best parts of those games in my opinion, but the strategic stealth and near endless amount of possibilities make the Phantom Pain's take on the gameplay feature even more satisfying than Far Cry's ever was. Let's say you have successfully taken over an outpost in a non-lethal manner. Now you have the ability to Fulton extract every soldier to recruit them to Diamond Dogs, part of the game's excellent overarching subgame. Throughout the Phantom Pain, you are building an ever-growing army, and it's your job to manage all attributes of the system, from the base's composition to the development of the soldiers themselves. The base itself is composed of various subdivisions, which you can improve through gaining certain resources while out in the field. Diamond Dog soldiers are automatically assigned to these partitions, and the divisions themselves along with the addition of generally higher skilled soldiers. As Mother Base's selections are further leveled, certain features open up to take advantage of, but the biggest is definitely R&D. The more advanced people within your research and development are, the better weaponry and gear you'll be able to obtain, which is what you'll be taking with you during missions in the form of loadouts. With all of this comes a variety of customization options as well, even if it may not be the selling point of the package. You can change the color of the base, construct an original emblem, and even add a song to play each time you ride on your helicopter. Despite my rather obvious affection for the gameplay, the Phantom Pain isn't without its own issues. Above all, I found the helicopter animation to be extremely repetitive, as it did exactly the same thing every time you utilize the helicopter, and you will probably use this helicopter hundreds of times throughout your playthrough, but that number will obviously fluctuate depending on your commitment to the optional content. Secondly, I flat out dislike the full-on action missions. There were really only 2 in the entire game, but I found myself almost completely screwed at one point because I had nearly exclusively invested into stealth-only gear. While going completely Rambo is better outfitted in this game than any other title in the series, stealth is still the priority, and these kinds of sections don't work as well. Though, that notion is still kind of strange to me because I found all of the bosses, some of which require absolute action, to be incredibly fun, even if there are only a few in the final product. The only other issue I had was that the final story mission of the game was disappointing to say the least. I'm not going to spoil anything, but what I will say is that even though there are different cutscenes and huge story moments occurring, the actual block of the mission is a complete copy and paste from an earlier level of the game. This was nothing but disappointing for me in this regard, as the story portion itself could have driven the gameplay side of the mission to awesome levels, but it was ultimately wasted, proving that at least some parts of this game were rushed out the door. When Ground Zeroes was first released in early 2014, it was the best looking game I'd ever seen at the time. But, like most games, it was much more visually appealing at night, rather than during the daytime portions, but it was still outstanding to look at regardless. Since that initial release, other games have ultimately overtaken it graphically, like Assassin's Creed Unity and The Order 1886, but the Phantom Pain still looks good. It's just not part of the elite. Sound design is an area of technicality that I think the game truly shines in. Voice acting is top-notch, and even though no one can completely replace David Hayter's iconic voice, Kiefer Sutherland still does a good job and fits the character of Big Boss well. I also feel that Troy Baker had a decent performance as Ocelot, even though I still feel they redesigned his character wrong, as he does not look younger than an almost 50-year-old Big Boss. Aside from the voice acting though, the music in the game is also great, boasting a mix of impressive symphonic tracks and fitting license song from the 1980s. Exclusively on PC, you can go into the file directory and add in your own songs into the game. Naturally, I added a handful of my favorite songs from that era, and after all, is there anything more satisfying than taking an outpost to the rhythm of Panama or Master of Puppets? The Phantom Pain, despite some of its apparent issues, is a watershed moment for the gaming industry. Metal Gear has typically been a set of linear stealth sequences in between each lengthy story beat. Not only did they successfully manage to translate the core stealth into its open-world playground, they completely knocked it out of the park on their first try. Even though I enjoyed Peace Walker, this game outshines it in every aspect imaginable. It's kind of amazing to think just how well it all came out despite the troubled Konami development. And the result is a future legacy. A controversial prologue, needless over-sexualization, microtransactions, cut content from Konami, a rumored dismissal of Kojima, and a story that's divided the fans in all the right ways. And despite all that, the acclaim this game has received has been through the roof. People will be talking about this game 10 years down the line, and still referring back to its effectiveness at open-world gameplay. Metal Gear Solid games have been called out in the past for being too much of a movie, and this game officially deviates from that formula, even if this is the conclusion to the whole narrative. The Phantom Pain is in some ways referential to us as players of the franchise. We don't want this series that we've come to know and love for probably most of our mature lifetime to come to an end. And I'd be lying if I said I'm not going to miss this series. But man, what an encore this is to go out on. How's it going, guys? It's certainly been a while. I've been busy, and it's good to be back. And I'm curious as to what your impressions are of the channel so far. I mean, obviously, I changed the name to Native Resolution, and some of the content's going to be a little different, and the reviews are a little different, but it's basically the same content. If anything, there's more here to it. And I'm just curious on what the overall thought is of you guys. So if you could leave that in the comment section, that'd be great. And thank you. Thank you for watching.